Welcome back to the Docker File Options section of the Getting Started with Docker course. In this lesson, we're going to be covering the expose command. So let's look at our instructions here, and we'll go down to the, actually up it should be, to the expose. And what this does is, and this is a little confusing at first, but it's just documentation. It doesn't actually do anything. So if I were to say in this right here, I could say expose and the port. So maybe port 80, which is the typical HTTP web port. And I could say, well, I actually also want to expose port 443, which is the HTTPS web port, the standard one at least. What this does is it says, this image has two ports it wants to communicate on or will listen on. But that's it. That's all it does. It doesn't actually do any work. So the expose instructions do not actually publish the port. So this is a little bit different. Let's open up our PowerShell here, and I'll make it a little smaller so you can see all of this at once. So in PowerShell, remember we did the Docker run, and we had a couple different things like name, but one of them was -p, and then we said port 8080, which is our machine, maps over to port 80 on the container. This is a little bit different than expose. So expose just says, hey, I'm listening on these two ports. The -p, when we do the run, what that's doing is saying, okay, I know you're listening on port 80, so I'm going to map that to port 8080 on this machine, on my machine. So these two are different commands. So expose is not the same thing as the -p, which is publish. So just note those two things, but expose is basically just documentation. That way, when you go later and say, well, what does this container listen on? What's this image listen on? Well, you know because it says expose port 80 and expose port 443. Then you can specify the protocol if you want. So here it's specified /UDP versus TCP. And you can expose both if you would like. Now there is also another command, -P. So when you're doing your run, let's open up PowerShell again. Instead of saying lowercase p, we could say uppercase P. And what that will do is it will take our documentation and expose the ports we need, and it will choose the ports for us. So, and it will make sure that the TCP and the UDP are not the same port. So it's going to select an ephemeral high-ordered host port. It's typically not what you want to do, because typically you want to know what port it is without having to wait until it's built or running and then look for it. But in the case we're doing some quick work, and you just want to have it just work and just run real quick, that might be an option. But either way, with expose, we're just saying here are the ports that the container will listen on, or the image will listen on. Okay, so that's all expose is. It's just documentation. It's important because you do want to document these things, and like I said, -P will be able to look for it, but otherwise, that's all it's for. Okay, so that is the expose command. And now that's kind of the end of this video. Let's move on to the next command in the next video.